I was mesmerized. And while Lindsay said that I can pronounce the name of the town, South India is not my background. I'm from West India, and the difference is like Germany and France. So it does take me a while to learn to pronounce the South Indian names. And this place that I'm talking to you about is called Tiruvannamalai.
Jesus.
And Tiruvannamalai, there you go. And I have mispronounced it many, many times. And I just enjoy now getting it right. So it's based on the book by, well, initial introduction is book by Paul Brunton, and then there were a few other authors that I came across. David Goodman I came across. I also came across Arthur Osborne. Here is a book by Arthur Osborne. And the reason I am picking these Western authors in this particular evening is, I mean, there are heaps of Indian authors also who have written about Tiruvannamalai, but I wanted it to be as factual rather than all emotional, and the Indian authors are on the emotional side. So I thought that I will bring to you an analysis that has been done by people primarily during the British Raj in India, who went to this place, who experienced something ecstatic out of the world, and have put it in words that are very conducive to a Western person who is brought in a Western way of thinking, which is always logical, rational, which will not look for ghosts or gods out of the cloud. And that's why I picked up these three authors. Page 134 of Paul Brunton. We leave the train, and with it the main line 40 miles from Pondicherry, that pathetic little remnant of France's territorial possessions in India. Then he goes on saying, he took a train from Pondicherry, then reached Tiruvannamalai, stayed there. He reached there around 2:33 in the morning, and then he's waiting for the morning so that he can take a bullock cart and go to the foothills. We wait patiently while day fights with darkness for supremacy. When a pale dawn emerges at last, creeping bit by bit through a small barred window in the back of our waiting room, I peer out at such portion of our surroundings as become visible. Out of the morning haze, there rises the faint outline of a solitary hill, apparently some few miles distant. The base is of impressive extent and the body of ample girth, but head is not to be seen, being yet thick shrouded in the dawn mist. Amazing, that was almost 80 years ago. And I took this photograph as I reached Tiruvannamalai. First visit was, I think it was August 2013, and I was mesmerized. Sorry, that gave away my secret. I have a little story. Arunachala. Now here is another name. Arunachala or Arunachalam is the name of the hill, and the name of the place is Tiruvannamalai. Arunachala, the sacred red mountain, writes Paul Brunton. He's writing, exclaims my companion, noticing the direction of my gaze, that is Paul Brunton's. A fervent expression of adoration passes across his face. He is momentarily wrapped in ecstasy, like some medieval saint. I ask him, does the name mean anything? I have just given you the meaning. He replies with a smile. The name is composed of two words, Aruna and Achala, which means red and mountain. And since it is also the name of the presiding deity of the temple, there is a temple from around 1080 over there. Its full translation would mean sacred red mountain. And you would not blame me if that description could almost apply to a sacred red mountain deep in the heart of Australia. And I'm as proud and as amazed by this. But then we have to reach Arunachalam, This is again my wonderful photography. My car driver knows exactly what kind of a person I am. This is how you ride. If you don't have a car, you take some transitory diversions to reach to the mountain.
Trains.
Yes.
Trains.
And then, sorry. And then I reached there. I stayed there for a couple of nights. Went up the mountain path, and in fact there is a magazine that gets published over now 60-70 years. It's called Mountain Path. One may be almost thinking of Mugamara in the north of Sydney as one looks at the flora and fauna. This is the base of a banyan tree. And this is the banyan tree. This is all in the campus of the ashram and then going uphill. This is South India. So this is Tamil Nadu, the state, and therefore coconut is in fact one of the part of that local economy. And then there are lots of animals and monkeys all over the place, including on the road to Tiruvannamalai on the way to Arunachalam. And in fact, that girth that Paul Brenton talks about, the base of the mountain is about 14 kilometers and people do a walk around it. So this is a picture from around the walk. This is not a zoo. The animals are all freely roaming. It's a very unique place, very silent, no airport. A train station is there, but very few trains rattling around. And also the food for the peacock. There is always a cow. This is a cow shed. And
a dingo.
And some unique animals up on the hill. And bloody vandals. Yeah, our graffiti project can go up to Tiruvannamalai. There is a place called Virupaksha Cave, all up in the hills. But it's now luckily protected, so less vandalism. But this is where I'm taking you. It's really a place of silence. And I've seen very few places, hardly any place in India where there are as many Western people coming in and climbing up the mountain and sitting in rapt meditation, total silence. And just looking at them, one gets a feel that there's something happening inside them that is inexpressible through words. So this is Paul Brenton. This is his time period, and this is the time when he wrote A Search in Secret India. And after the book got published, this is British Raj up until 1947. Shiploads of people, shiploads of British and Americans got onto the boat, came to Chennai, took the train, went to Tiruvannamalai, and stayed in the ashram. And Lindsay mentioned about Ramana Maharshi. I'm going to mention that a little later. Ramana Maharshi is the fulcrum, the axle behind all of this. But Paul Brenton was the one who spent a lot of time with him. And there are a couple of very, very nice excerpts from The Search in Secret India. I won't read it out to you, but I just think that Mr. Brenton has really captured as much as words can capture that which is coming from beyond the words. So if any one of you find this interesting and relevant, the presentation is yours, and also if you want to borrow these books, feel free to do so. I found these quotes also very interesting. Perhaps the world incubating over Asiatic wisdom and Western science will one day hatch out a civilization that will shame antiquity, deride modernity, and amaze posterity. And I also like this one: man is grandly related, and a greater being is grandly related, and a greater being suckled him than his mother. In his wiser moments, he may come to know this. Paul Brenton has been quite popular actually in terms of bringing this particular message to the West. And of the many people that were impressed, there was Major A.W. Chadwick, OBE, and he was in the British Army serving in South America when he came across this book. And guess what he did? He just quit his job and came to Tiruvannamalai in November 1935, and that's it. That's where he stayed. And I found that mesmerizing. Chadwick here and Chadwick here are like a real metamorphosis, if you like. And when I read this, actually it hurt my Indian ego that someone who did not have an Indian background could come to a place and get something of value and transform himself. And here I am, not even aware of this wonderful place. So Chadwick is actually not only Chadwick, but Sadhu Arunachala, as he renamed himself, stayed there, died there, and there is a beautiful memorial, Chadwick Memorial, in the Ramana Maharshi ashram. This is how he looked in his later days. This is his grave or shrine or samadhi, as the Indians call it. Major A.W. Chadwick, born in England, and all his details. And there are a few Westerners who lie there peacefully in this place in the ashram in Tiruvannamalai. I went there. This is not the dress that I wear in Western India. This is the dress of Southern India. Just as an aside. And then I came across Arthur Osborne. In fact, a couple of friends here, Prashant Rajput, who lives in Normanhurst, works in St. George, and another friend, M.B.L. Narayan, he is in Canberra. They gave me these couple of books by Arthur Osborne, and they again stayed in my bookshelf for almost 6 months without me touching them. And then I started reading them, and this is again the book by Arthur Osborne, For Those with Little Dust, and there are a few others. And so For Those with Little Dust is one of his very popular book, Arthur Osborne. He was also a poet. I don't have the time to read out some of his poetry, but it is gripping. I have enjoyed going through his material, and I'm sure so will you. No wonder he also stayed there in Tiruvannamalai. In fact, this is next to Osborne House in Tiruvannamalai. This is about 500 meters from the foothills. This shrine actually belongs to my friend's grandfather, my friend Narayan, who lives in Canberra. And then there is the Arthur Osborne House. So it's a very mysterious place, a very mystical place, not a threatening place, not a fortune teller's place, but something that I am not able to entirely express in words. As you mentioned, Lindsay, Ramana Maharshi was the person around whom these three wonderful people, Chadwick, Osborne, and Brunton, stayed and loved him, and so did David Goodman. And when Osborne saw him first time, there's a chapter in here, a man called Ramana, and this is how Osborne describes him. As he saw Ramana Maharshi come down the hills, it was the most majestic film I have ever seen, the most awe-inspiring, and yet without any incident. A view of Arunachalam hills from the ashram drive, and then a tall, frail, light-complexioned man with short white hair descending the slope of the hill with the aid of a staff. Then he was seen coming out of the ashram hall, stopping to smile to a baby, walking across the ashram ground. Just simple, everyday actions, and yet the beauty of it was so breathtaking. The simplicity was so natural, the smile was so spontaneous, and the majesty so inherent. And as I mentioned to you, I have picked Western authors who are most of the time factual, who don't use words unnecessarily, and these are the words that these wonderful authors have used. So you can imagine the place called Tiruvannamalai, the hill called Arunachalam, the man called Ramana Maharshi. It's a mesmerizing place. So, what did I get out of it? I had harbored the desire to go there for almost 20 years, 18 years. And then I was invited by a management institute in Chennai to deliver some lectures in my IT specialty. And I said, I want to go to that place, about 4 hours drive. I mentioned it to one of my past PhD students, Anand, and he said, oh, you're coming to Chennai? Here is my car, here is my driver. You don't hire a car, you don't do anything, you take my car and my driver. So I said, I will hire your car and your driver. I'll pay your driver and so on. And I went there. And yeah, I cried. When I reached there, there is a certain amount of relief. Not that I'm in tremendous pressure, but there is some amount of relief by just reaching the place. And I've described it back home to Asha and the kids also. If I have to put words to what I got by visiting that place, these are the 3 words that came to my mind. Firstly, that silence is pregnant. Silence is not zero, nothing, but silence has a lot that comes out of it. And the whole place is silent. Yeah, there is the cacophony of bullock carts and tuk-tuk drivers and so on. But suddenly you climb up the hill or you walk around the ashram and you feel palpable silence. That's what I got, if I may say so. Secondly, awareness of small things. I mean, I'm walking in my home and I'm knocking on a chair, or I can see a book lying down there, and usually my desire is to not knock the chair or pick up the book. But after this visit, I divided it in 2 parts. First, I want to be aware of the fact that I'm disliking knocking a chair down. It never happened in 2 parts for me. It was always one whole thing that I have to correct. The desire to correct has reduced immensely, which doesn't mean correction is not happening, but it is more of a happening rather than doing. And the third, there is this place has celebration. This is ecstasy. And actually I researched the word ecstasy. It's a very, very charming English word which says stand out, ecstasy, standing outside. And I guess this place gives a message that you can stand outside your body. Now, I don't claim to have stood outside my body, but it is just that there is a separation between I and my body. And to that extent, I would love to credit the English language. I, in fact, read, write, speak fluently 4 languages, not 4 dialects: English, Hindi, Gujarati, and Marathi. Of which, and I love all 4 languages, English is the only language where I is written in capital. And that I does not refer to the body. And Ramana Maharshi's message can be written on the back of a postcard. Very, very simple. And the simplest of messages, when people came and asked him, you know, I need help in life, blah, blah, he would say, find out who you are. So his message comes in a booklet called Who Am I? And there the I is in capital. And that I is not the I that separates you from me. That is a common I. That is what one may say is the spirit. And Brenton, of course, searched for it. This is the hill at night time. They light a fire once in a year. This is the 1,000-year-old, or I should say now more than 1,000-year-old temple. And Brunton, I'm concluding now. Brunton in Search in Secret India writes his conclusion. The indigo sky is strewn with stars, which cluster in countless thousands close over our heads. The rising moon is a thin crescent disk of silver light. On our left, the evening fireflies are making the compound grow radiant, and above them, the plumed heads of tall palms stand out in lac silhouette against the sky. my adventure in self-metamorphosis is over. Thank you very much.